So this was really an interesting week in the questions because so many of you had the same basic question, which is what's too much editing, and what happens when a photographer changes too much in an image. So I wanted to I can't show it here on screen, but I wanted to say that, for instance, this last month the World Press Photo Contest disqualified 20% of the finalists who had submitted professional news photography from around the world because they were found to have been manipulated or post-processed, like after you shot them in processing. There was just too much manipulation of the images. And I think it goes to that question that Hani Farid asked in the video we watched, which is, when there's a pile of sand and you take away a couple of particles, does that change things substantially? And how many particles do you take away before you've changed the truth of that pile of sand? Ditto with an image. How many pixels can you change before you've changed the truth of the image? So really great. So what happens to photographers who edit their photos? They get called out, they lose awards, they lose jobs. It's taken very seriously. Can photo manipulation be justifiable? Seth asks. As a newspaper editor, what I was always looking for was that line between too much and between too much editing and the right amount. And the question is, you don't want to change the truth of the image. You don't want to make somebody look better than they actually look. You don't want to make them look worse. You don't want to change the color of the sky or change the color of their eyes or the shirt. That's not acceptable. That's what's done in advertising. But in news photography, there are filters in Photoshop that'll sharpen up a part of the image. So if there's a detail that's blurry, how much of that should you allow? Each newsroom makes its own decisions about what is acceptable, and quality newsrooms try to adhere to guidelines that are set up through the National Press Photographers Association or other organizations like actually we were looking at the NPPA guidelines for ethics. Would you say most photos in news are retouched? My guess is that they are. Most of them are cropped at some point. Many of them may have had a filter applied to adjust. Like, I can see the sky right now and it's a certain color. If I took a picture with my camera, it might change the color a little bit. And so I would apply a filter to get back to the original color of the sky. That's an acceptable editing. Lots of questions along these. Have there been any controversies lately with journalists editing their photos? Absolutely. If you look at that World Press Photo Contest, you'll see a fifth of the entrants were kicked out for excessive editing. When is photo manipulation okay in news? It's not. It's not if it goes to the point of changing the truth of the image. As long as you label the image as that's been altered, is any alteration all right to run? Raymond, that's a great question. I think as long as you label it and you make it clear to the viewer that we're giving you a trick photo or a manipulated image or a composite image, as long as you don't represent it as a photograph, a photo documentation of an event, I think you're okay. I mean, in my newspaper, we created a lot of graphics to illustrate feature stories that were a composite of photos and things added in, and we made it clear to people that that's what we were doing. Whereas on the front page, the news photos, no, those have not been manipulated in that way. Please upload the handout slides. Yes, ma'am, I did. I re-uploaded them, so the version that's now on Blackboard is the correct version. How do you decide what photo to show? So the rule of thumb, and if you're in one of my journalism classes, you heard me talk about this, is that you want the photographer to go to the emotional heart of the story and start shooting pictures there. I want a picture that captures the essence of what happened or who that person is or what was done at this location. And so choosing the picture, you're looking for what we talked about in the NPPA ethics code, a faithful and comprehensive depiction of events or people. You're also looking for one that will reproduce well, whether it's on a website or a newspaper or a video report. What's the difference between posed and pictured? Well, that's a great sort of philosophical question. So the posed picture was where the New York Times photographer put those gallery employees in place so that that would look what, the composition would be what the photographer wanted. Pictured is a question of framing and orientation. I may want to capture a certain aspect of a basketball player's game. This person has an incredible crossover dribble. And so I'm going to shoot that from the angle that captures that skill the best. And that's what we mean by pictured. I want a graceful composition that also shows the way that crossover dribble is accomplished in a series of 4 pictures, right? When the shuttle blew up in the sky and the photographer, by training, by experience, brought that frame over and placed the vapor trail in the corner of the frame so that you had this leading line, that was a natural way to say, okay, this is a photo that's got a linear element to it, and so I'm going to use my training to put that linear element in the right place. It's not an improper manipulation, but it's the creation of a pleasing image or an image that really tells the story and gives you a sense of scale. This is a great question from Safiat. Does the obscenity clause in the Freedom of Speech Amendment, the First Amendment, cover images of blood and gore? Man, this is a debate for the ages. We make a big deal about sexual images and images of nudity, but we don't have a ruling on whether a picture of somebody with a hole blown in their head is obscene. It's a great question. It describes our culture really well, that we don't think violence is obscene and we do think sex is obscene. I mean, when you think about that, you could do a whole comedy riff on it, couldn't you? Can a picture without words be used as a complete story? Yeah, what the jargon for that is, it's called a standalone image, and it's just a lot of times it would be something simple. There's a county fair or some outdoor event that's very visual. It doesn't require a lot of explanation. You go shoot 1 or 2 or 3 pictures and you run those, maybe with the captions, but the pictures tell the story well. When these whales wash up on the south shore of Long Island and people are out there trying to roll the whale over into the water, those images really are almost enough to tell the whole story. Sonisha wants to know, what do you mean by faith in a photograph? F-A-I-T-H. What I mean is, can you trust it? Is it a reliable image? Can you place your trust, is really a better word, that image is accurate, that it's a faithful and comprehensive depiction of what's going on? How has the internet and smartphone cameras changed the power of images? It hasn't changed the inherent power of images at all, I would say, but it has put the power to document, to photo document, in everyone's hands. Not only to photo document, but to distribute. If I get that picture of a police officer using excessive force, and I post that on the internet and it goes viral, that's given me and my cell phone camera a great deal of power that maybe only used to rest in the hands of professional journalists who had a way through a newspaper or a TV station to distribute the images they captured. All right, I'll see you next week.